Once upon a time, in New York City, there lived an elderly woman named Grandma Margaret Sterling. Grandma Margaret was not just any ordinary woman. She was the respected chairwoman of Empire National Bank, one of the most powerful private banks in America. For 3 months, she had been away from the bank. Many people believed she was resting. Some thought she was ill. Others quietly whispered that perhaps age had finally convinced her to retire. But none of those rumors were true. For 3 months, Grandma Margaret had been doing something far more important. She had been watching, thinking, planning. Every morning, she sat beside the large window of her Manhattan penthouse, looking out over the city skyline while reading reports from Empire National Bank. She studied performance reports, employee reviews, customer feedback, department updates. Nothing escaped her attention. But no matter how many reports she read, one thought remained heavy on her heart. Her grandson, Alexander Sterling. Alexander was everything the business world admired. Young, brilliant, successful, handsome, and already worth billions of dollars. Business magazines called him a financial genius. Investors called him a visionary. Board members called him the future of Empire National Bank. But Grandma Margaret saw something nobody else saw: loneliness. For all his success, Alexander struggled with something money could not solve. People were fascinated by his wealth, his status, his family name, his future inheritance. Yet very few cared about the man behind those things. Over the years, he had dated several women. At first, everything always seemed genuine. Then eventually, the conversations would change. Luxury vacations, private jets, expensive gifts, business connections. The relationship would stop being about Alexander and start becoming about what Alexander could provide. Each disappointment hardened his heart a little more, and Grandma Margaret hated watching it happen. One chilly morning, she finally reached a decision. She closed a report and placed it carefully on the table. Then she smiled, a slow, mischievous smile. Enough! Her assistant, who had been organizing documents nearby, looked up immediately. "Ma'am." Grandma Margaret rose from her chair. "If I want to know who truly deserves a place in this family, I cannot keep sitting up here reading reports." The assistant looked confused. "What are you planning?" Grandma Margaret's eyes sparkled. "I'm going back to work." The assistant blinked. "Back to work?" "Yes." A few minutes later, she walked into her dressing room. Instead of choosing one of her elegant designer outfits, she opened an old closet hidden at the back. Inside was something unexpected: a faded cleaning uniform, plain shoes, simple glasses, and an old gold watch. The watch looked cheap, almost fake. Most people would assume it came from a discount store. But in reality, it was one of the most valuable possessions she owned. It had belonged to her late husband, the man who had helped build the Sterling family empire. She carefully fastened it around her wrist and stared at her reflection. The powerful chairwoman disappeared. In her place stood an elderly cleaning woman that nobody would look at twice. Grandma Margaret smiled. Perfect. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Sterling was preparing for his day. Unlike most billionaires, he hated public attention. He rarely gave interviews, avoided television appearances, and refused to live his life in front of cameras. Even many employees working inside Empire National Bank would not recognize him if he walked past them. That anonymity made Grandma Margaret's plan possible. Later that morning, Alexander arrived at her penthouse. The moment he stepped inside and saw her holding a cleaning bucket, he burst out laughing. "Grandma, you're actually doing it." "I certainly am." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Alexander shook his head. "You know people are going to think you've lost your mind." Grandma Margaret chuckled. "No, they're going to show us exactly who they are." His smile slowly faded. Because he knew she was right. She stepped closer and adjusted his collar. "My dear boy, before you officially take over this bank, there is something I need to find." Alexander looked at her curiously. "What?" "The woman who would still choose you if you had nothing." The room became quiet. Alexander lowered his eyes. Because deep down, that was exactly what he wanted too. Someone who loved him. Not his money. Not his position. Not the Sterling name. Just him. Grandma Margaret squeezed his shoulder gently. "Today, we're going to find out whether that woman exists." An hour later, they arrived at Empire National Bank separately. Grandma Margaret entered through the employee entrance carrying a cleaning bucket. Nobody paid attention to her. Nobody greeted her. Nobody looked twice. Exactly as she expected. A few minutes later, Alexander entered the building as a newly hired intern. No luxury suit. No bodyguards. No signs of wealth. Just a young man carrying a folder. Inside the bank, employees were already gossiping. The topic was the same one they discussed almost every day. Alexander Sterling, the mysterious billionaire heir, the future CEO. One woman laughed. If I ever meet Alexander Sterling, I'm definitely marrying him. The others giggled. I heard he's incredibly handsome. I heard he owns 3 penthouses. I heard women practically throw themselves at him. None of them realized the man they were discussing was already inside the building. Listening, watching, learning. And somewhere in that same building worked a young accountant named Emma Carter. A woman whose kindness would soon change everything. A woman who had no idea that destiny was quietly walking toward her. Neither Alexander nor Emma knew it yet. But before long, their lives would become connected in a way neither of them could ever have imagined. And when that happened, secrets would be exposed. Hearts would be tested. And true love would be forced to prove itself. But all of that was still ahead. For now, the game had only just begun. Welcome to Super Stories. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, or somewhere else in the world? Drop your country, state, or city in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story already, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Super Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional billionaire romance, family drama, or life-changing story. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly inside Empire National Bank. Most employees eventually returned to their work after the uncomfortable confrontation between Vanessa Reed and Emma Carter. The gossip faded. The tension disappeared. But one person couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Grandma Margaret Sterling. As she slowly pushed her cleaning cart through the accounting department, her eyes occasionally drifted toward Emma's desk. Emma had already returned to work. No boasting. No dramatic retelling of what happened. No attempt to gain attention from her coworkers. She simply continued reviewing financial reports as though defending a stranger was the most normal thing in the world. That impressed Grandma Margaret even more. Throughout her career, she had met politicians, celebrities, executives, and billionaires. Many of them talked about kindness. Far fewer actually practiced it, especially when there was nothing to gain. Later that afternoon, when most employees were busy finishing assignments, Grandma Margaret approached Emma's desk. "Excuse me, my dear." Emma immediately looked up. The warm smile from earlier returned. "Of course, ma'am. Is everything okay?" "I'm perfectly fine." Grandma Margaret smiled. "I just wanted to thank you properly." Emma shook her head. "You don't need to thank me." "Oh, but I do." She pulled a nearby chair slightly closer. Not many people would have spoken up today. Emma looked uncomfortable receiving praise. "I just don't like seeing people treated badly." Grandma Margaret nodded. "And yet most people watched." Emma glanced around the office. "I guess sometimes people are afraid of becoming the next target." The older woman smiled. "Perhaps." For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Grandma Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Tell me something, Emma." "Sure. Are you married?" Emma nearly laughed. The question caught her completely off guard. "No." "Engaged?" "No." "Dating anyone?" Emma smiled. "No, ma'am." Grandma Margaret folded her hands. "A beautiful young woman like you?" Emma laughed softly. "I've had enough relationship drama to last a lifetime." Something in her voice made Grandma Margaret curious. "What happened?" Emma hesitated. She normally didn't discuss personal matters at work. Yet there was something comforting about the elderly woman sitting in front of her. Maybe it was the kindness in her eyes. Maybe it was the fact that she reminded her of her own grandmother. Either way, she found herself answering honestly. "My last relationship didn't end well." Grandma Margaret listened quietly. "He was my coworker." "What happened?" Emma sighed. "I trusted him." A brief sadness crossed her face. "Then I found out he'd been seeing someone else." The older woman frowned. "I'm sorry, my dear." Emma shrugged. "It taught me a lesson." "What lesson?" "That character matters more than charm." Grandma Margaret couldn't help smiling. That was exactly the answer she hoped to hear. Before she could say anything else, a familiar voice sounded behind her. "Grandma." Emma looked up. A young man stood nearby. Tall, well-dressed but not flashy. confident without appearing arrogant. There was something calm about him, something genuine. His eyes immediately met Emma's. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Grandma Margaret stood. Perfect timing. She looked at Emma. "My dear, I'd like you to meet my grandson." Emma smiled politely. "Oh." The young man extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Alexander." Emma shook it. "Emma, it's nice to meet you." "You too." Alexander smiled. There was something refreshing about her. She wasn't trying to impress him, wasn't flirting, wasn't acting differently because he was a man. She was simply being herself. Grandma Margaret watched the interaction carefully. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Then she spoke. "Alexander just started here today." Emma looked surprised. "He works here." "As an intern," Alexander answered. Emma blinked. An intern. For some reason, she hadn't expected that. He carried himself with a confidence that felt unusual. Still, she smiled warmly. "Welcome to Empire National Bank." "Thank you. I hope your first day hasn't been too overwhelming." Alexander laughed. "I've survived so far." "That's a good sign." The three shared a brief laugh. For the first time all day, Alexander felt completely relaxed. No expectations. No pressure. No people trying to impress him because of his name. Just a normal conversation. Exactly what he had always wanted. Across the room, Vanessa noticed the interaction. Her eyes narrowed immediately. She watched Emma talking to Alexander. Then she looked at the cleaning woman standing beside them. Something about the scene irritated her. She couldn't explain why. But she didn't like it. Not one bit. Meanwhile, Grandma Margaret was quietly making plans. Years of business experience had taught her to trust her instincts. And her instincts were speaking very loudly. Emma Carter was different. The kindness, the confidence, the integrity, the humility, everything she had hoped to find. Of course, she wasn't making decisions yet. But she knew one thing for certain. She wanted to see more. A lot more. An opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A department manager approached Emma's desk carrying a file. "Emma." She looked up. "Yes, sir?" "I need someone to lead a review of the Harrington corporate accounts." Emma immediately straightened. It was one of the department's most important assignments. "Of course." The manager nodded. "You'll have assistance." He turned toward Alexander. "The new intern will work with you." Emma glanced at Alexander. Alexander glanced at Emma. The manager smiled. "I expect a complete report by Friday." "Yes, sir," Emma replied. "We'll get started immediately." The manager walked away. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Alexander smiled. "Looks like we're partners." Emma laughed softly. "Looks like it." Neither of them knew it yet. But that assignment would become the beginning of everything. And from a short conversation over spreadsheets and financial reports, a connection would slowly begin to grow. A connection neither of them had been expecting. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly inside Empire National Bank. Most employees eventually returned to their work after the uncomfortable confrontation between Vanessa Reed and Emma Carter. The gossip faded. The tension disappeared. But one person couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Grandma Margaret Sterling. As she slowly pushed her cleaning cart through the accounting department, her eyes occasionally drifted toward Emma's desk. Emma had already returned to work. No boasting. No dramatic retelling of what happened. No attempt to gain attention from her coworkers. She simply continued reviewing financial reports as though defending a stranger was the most normal thing in the world. That impressed Grandma Margaret even more. Throughout her career, she had met politicians, celebrities, executives, and billionaires. Many of them talked about kindness. Far fewer actually practiced it, especially when there was nothing to gain. Later that afternoon, when most employees were busy finishing assignments, Grandma Margaret approached Emma's desk. "Excuse me, my dear." Emma immediately looked up. The warm smile from earlier returned. "Of course, ma'am. Is everything okay?" "I'm perfectly fine." Grandma Margaret smiled. "I just wanted to thank you properly." Emma shook her head. "You don't need to thank me." "Oh, but I do." She pulled a nearby chair slightly closer. Not many people would have spoken up today. Emma looked uncomfortable receiving praise. "I just don't like seeing people treated badly." Grandma Margaret nodded. "And yet most people watched." Emma glanced around the office. "I guess sometimes people are afraid of becoming the next target." The older woman smiled. "Perhaps." For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Grandma Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Tell me something, Emma." "Sure." Are you married? Emma nearly laughed. The question caught her completely off guard. No. Engaged? No. Dating anyone? Emma smiled. No, ma'am. Grandma Margaret folded her hands. A beautiful young woman like you? Emma laughed softly. I've had enough relationship drama to last a lifetime. Something in her voice made Grandma Margaret curious. What happened? Emma hesitated. She normally didn't discuss personal matters at work. Yet there was something comforting about the elderly woman sitting in front of her. Maybe it was the kindness in her eyes. Maybe it was the fact that she reminded her of her own grandmother. Either way, she found herself answering honestly. My last relationship didn't end well. Grandma Margaret listened quietly. He was my coworker. What happened? Emma sighed. I trusted him. A brief sadness crossed her face. Then I found out he'd been seeing someone else. The older woman frowned. I'm sorry, my dear. Emma shrugged. It taught me a lesson. What lesson? That character matters more than charm. Grandma Margaret couldn't help smiling. That was exactly the answer she hoped to hear. Before she could say anything else, a familiar voice sounded behind her. Grandma. Emma looked up. A young man stood nearby. Tall, well-dressed but not flashy. Confident without appearing arrogant. There was something calm about him. Something genuine. His eyes immediately met Emma's. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Grandma Margaret stood. Perfect timing. She looked at Emma. My dear, I'd like you to meet my grandson. Emma smiled politely. Oh, the young man extended his hand. Hi, I'm Alexander. Emma shook it. Emma, it's nice to meet you. You too. Alexander smiled. There was something refreshing about her. She wasn't trying to impress him. Wasn't flirting. Wasn't acting differently because he was a man. She was simply being herself. Grandma Margaret watched the interaction carefully. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Then she spoke. Alexander just started here today. Emma looked surprised. He works here. As an intern, Alexander answered. Emma blinked. An intern. For some reason, she hadn't expected that. He carried himself with a confidence that felt unusual. Still, she smiled warmly. Welcome to Empire National Bank. Thank you. I hope your first day hasn't been too overwhelming. Alexander laughed. I've survived so far. That's a good sign. The three shared a brief laugh. For the first time all day, Alexander felt completely relaxed. No expectations. No pressure. No people trying to impress him because of his name. Just a normal conversation. Exactly what he had always wanted. Across the room, Vanessa noticed the interaction. Her eyes narrowed immediately. She watched Emma talking to Alexander. Then she looked at the cleaning woman standing beside them. Something about the scene irritated her. She couldn't explain why. But she didn't like it. Not one bit. Meanwhile, Grandma Margaret was quietly making plans. Years of business experience had taught her to trust her instincts. And her instincts were speaking very loudly. Emma Carter was different. The kindness, the confidence, the integrity, the humility. Everything she had hoped to find. Of course, she wasn't making decisions yet. But she knew one thing for certain. She wanted to see more. A lot more. An opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A department manager approached Emma's desk carrying a file. Emma. She looked up. Yes, sir? I need someone to lead a review of the Harrington corporate accounts. Emma immediately straightened. It was one of the department's most important assignments. Of course. The manager nodded. You'll have assistance. He turned toward Alexander. The new intern will work with you. Emma glanced at Alexander. Alexander glanced at Emma. The manager smiled. I expect a complete report by Friday. Yes, sir, Emma replied. We'll get started immediately. The manager walked away. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Alexander smiled. Looks like we're partners. Emma laughed softly. Looks like it. Neither of them knew it yet. But that assignment would become the beginning of everything. And from a short conversation over spreadsheets and financial reports, a connection would slowly begin to grow. A connection neither of them had been expecting. The next morning, Emma arrived at Empire National Bank earlier than usual. The Harrington Corporate Accounts project was one of the most important reviews assigned that quarter, and she wanted to get a head start before the office became busy. When she reached her desk, she was surprised to find someone already there. Alexander. He sat quietly reviewing documents, a cup of coffee beside him. Emma checked the time. It was barely 7:15 a.m. Most employees wouldn't arrive for another 45 minutes. You're here early. Alexander looked up and smiled. So are you. Emma laughed. Fair point. She placed her bag on her desk. Most interns try to avoid extra work. Alexander shrugged. Most interns aren't working with the best accountant in the department. Emma rolled her eyes. That compliment won't help you escape the workload. Worth a try. For the first time that morning, she laughed. And Alexander immediately noticed something. Her smile transformed her entire face. The sadness he'd seen the previous day seemed to disappear whenever she laughed. As they settled into the project, Emma began explaining the account review process. Alexander listened carefully. Very carefully. Not because he needed the lesson. In reality, he already understood most of the material. But he enjoyed listening to her. She was passionate about her work. Confident without being arrogant. Intelligent without trying to prove it. Those qualities were rare. Across the room, Vanessa watched them. And the more she watched, the more irritated she became. By lunchtime, she finally couldn't keep quiet. She approached a group of coworkers. Have you noticed Emma spending a lot of time with the new intern? One woman shrugged. They were assigned to the same project. Vanessa smirked. Sure. Another employee frowned. What does that mean? It means she's getting awfully friendly for someone who claims she's focused on her career. The others exchanged looks. Nobody responded. Vanessa hated that. She preferred when people joined her gossip. Meanwhile, Emma and Alexander were reviewing transaction records. Emma pointed at a spreadsheet. See this section? Alexander leaned closer. What about it? The numbers don't match. He examined it for a moment. Then something immediately caught his eye. Wait. Emma looked at him. What? This transaction here. He pointed at the screen. The amount is duplicated. Emma frowned. No, it isn't. Then she looked again. A few seconds passed. Her eyes widened. Oh my goodness. Alexander smiled. What? You're right. She quickly checked the source files. Sure enough, the duplicate entry was there. The mistake had gone unnoticed for weeks. Emma looked at him with genuine surprise. That was impressive. Alexander shrugged casually. I got lucky. No. Emma shook her head. That wasn't luck. For a brief moment, she studied him. There was something unusual about him. Something she couldn't quite explain. Most interns spent their first few weeks asking questions. Alexander seemed to notice things experienced employees missed. It didn't make sense. And yet she found herself becoming more curious. That afternoon, Grandma Margaret quietly observed from a distance. The more she watched, the happier she became. Emma and Alexander worked naturally together. The conversations flowed easily. Neither seemed uncomfortable. Neither seemed forced. It was as though they had known each other much longer than 2 days. When Emma laughed at something Alexander said, Grandma Margaret smiled to herself. Interesting. Very interesting. Later that day, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Mom. Immediately she sighed. Alexander noticed. Everything okay? Emma laughed nervously. Depends. She answered the call. Hi, Mom. On the other end, her mother sounded excited. Emma, sweetheart, when am I finally meeting this wonderful man you're going to marry? Emma closed her eyes. Not this again. Mom. What? There is no wonderful man. There should be. Mom. I'm serious. Alexander tried not to smile as he focused on his paperwork. You're 30 years old. Thanks for the reminder. I just want you happy. I am happy. You'd be happier with someone special. Emma rubbed her forehead. We'll talk later. Emma. I love you, Mom. Then she quickly ended the call. The moment she lowered her phone, she groaned softly. Alexander chuckled. Family. Unfortunately. He smiled. Let me guess. Emma looked at him. You know exactly what she was saying, don't you? I have a feeling. Emma laughed. Marriage. Called it. Every conversation somehow becomes about marriage. Alexander smiled. Sounds exhausting. It is. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then something unexpected happened. Emma realized she was smiling, and she didn't want to stop. It had been a long time since talking to someone felt this easy. Across the office, Vanessa watched the exchange. Her jealousy deepened. She wasn't interested in Alexander as a person. She barely knew him. But she hated seeing Emma happy. Especially after standing up to her. Especially after embarrassing her. By the time the workday ended, Vanessa had made a decision. A dangerous decision. If Emma wanted to play the hero, Then Vanessa would make sure she regretted it. As the office slowly emptied, Alexander packed his things. So, Emma looked up. So, same time tomorrow? Emma smiled. You mean early? Painfully early. She laughed. Fine. Alexander smiled. Good. As he walked away, Emma watched him go. Then she quickly looked back at her computer. She didn't understand why her heart suddenly felt lighter. She didn't understand why she was looking forward to tomorrow. But one thing was becoming clear. The intern was slowly becoming much more than just a coworker. And neither of them realized that someone else had already started planning to tear them apart. Over the next few weeks, the Harrington project brought Emma and Alexander together almost every day. What started as a simple work assignment gradually became something neither of them expected. They spent long hours reviewing financial reports, checking transaction records, preparing presentations, solving problems together. And somewhere between spreadsheets and late evenings at the office, a friendship began to grow. A genuine friendship. For Emma, it felt refreshing. Alexander never tried to impress her. He never bragged, never acted superior, never made everything about himself. He listened, he paid attention, and somehow, he always knew how to make her smile. For Alexander, being around Emma felt like taking a deep breath after years of holding one. With her, he didn't have to be Alexander Sterling, billionaire heir. He didn't have to be the future CEO. He could simply be himself. One evening, after most employees had already gone home, Emma stretched and glanced at the clock. 7:30. Alexander looked up. We've been here all day. Emma laughed. I think we've earned a break. I agree. A brief silence followed. Then Alexander cleared his throat. Emma. Yeah. He hesitated. For a man who negotiated multimillion-dollar deals without blinking, he suddenly felt nervous. Very nervous. I was wondering something. Emma raised an eyebrow. Okay. Would you maybe like to have dinner with me sometime? For a moment, Emma simply stared at him. Not because she was offended. Not because she was surprised. But because she had secretly hoped he would ask. A smile slowly appeared on her face. Are you asking me on a date? Alexander smiled. Yes. Emma pretended to think about it. Alexander laughed. That doesn't sound promising. It depends. On what? Will there be food? Definitely. Then I think I can make time. Alexander smiled. A genuine smile. And for the first time in days, Emma felt butterflies. Real butterflies. The kind she thought she'd never feel again. Across the room, Grandma Margaret watched from a distance while pretending to clean a nearby office. The moment she saw Emma say yes, she nearly laughed out loud. Instead, she quietly turned away. Thank you, Lord. Her plan was moving faster than she expected. Much faster. A few days later, Alexander picked Emma up for their first official date. Emma had assumed he would choose someone extravagant, a luxury rooftop restaurant, an expensive steak, something flashy. Instead, Alexander drove her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street in Manhattan. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't crowded. But it was warm, comfortable, and surprisingly beautiful. Emma looked around. I like this place. Alexander smiled. I was hoping you would. You know, most people would try to impress someone on a first date. Maybe I am. Emma laughed. With pasta. Never underestimate pasta. She shook her head, smiling. Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. They talked about childhood memories, favorite movies, travel dreams, embarrassing stories. For the first time in years, Emma found herself opening up completely. At one point, Alexander asked softly, Do you ever miss him? Emma knew exactly who he meant. Her ex-boyfriend. She thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. No. Alexander looked surprised. Not at all. Emma smiled sadly. I miss who I thought he was. Alexander understood immediately. That answer carried more truth than most people realized. You deserved better. Emma looked down at her glass. Maybe. No. Alexander's voice was firm. You did. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma smiled softly. Thank you. Alexander smiled back. And something shifted between them. Something deeper than friendship. Something neither could ignore anymore. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa sat in her apartment staring at social media. Earlier that evening, she had seen Emma leaving the office with Alexander. At first, she hadn't cared. But curiosity got the better of her. Now she was furious. Absolutely furious. Because Emma looked happy. And Vanessa hated that. She threw her phone onto the couch. Unbelievable. For weeks, she'd watched Emma become more confident, more respected, more admired. And now she was dating the new intern. Someone actually liked Emma. Someone chose Emma. Vanessa couldn't stand it. She opened her laptop. A slow smile appeared on her face. If you want happiness, Emma. Her fingers tapped against the keyboard. Let's see how long it lasts. Back at the restaurant, the evening was coming to an end. Alexander walked Emma toward her apartment building. The city lights sparkled around them. Neither seemed eager for the night to end. I had a really good time. Alexander smiled. Me too. Emma looked at him. No. She laughed softly. I mean really good. Alexander felt his heart race. So did I. For a moment, neither moved. Neither looked away. Then Emma smiled. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Emma. She walked toward the entrance. Then paused. Turned around. And smiled one last time. Alexander watched her disappear inside. Only after the door closed did he realize something. He hadn't thought about work all evening. He hadn't thought about the bank. He hadn't thought about being CEO. For a few hours, he had simply enjoyed being with Emma. And that feeling was becoming dangerously important to him. As he drove home, one thought stayed in his mind. This wasn't just a date anymore. And if he wasn't careful, he was going to fall completely in love with her. Unfortunately, somewhere else in the city, someone was already preparing to make sure that never happened. The morning after their first date, Emma woke up smiling. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Just dinner. Just a pleasant evening. Just two coworkers getting to know each other. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Something had changed. And she could feel it. At Empire National Bank, Alexander felt the same way. For the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to work. Not because of reports. Not because of meetings. Not because of business. Because of Emma. When he arrived at the office, he spotted her almost immediately. She was reviewing documents at her desk, completely focused. A few loose strands of hair had fallen across her face. Without realizing it, Alexander smiled. Across the room, Grandma Margaret noticed. And she nearly laughed. The look on her grandson's face told her everything she needed to know. He was falling. Fast. Very fast. Unfortunately, someone else noticed too. Vanessa Reed. And unlike Grandma Margaret, she wasn't smiling. The jealousy that had been growing inside her was becoming impossible to control. Every day she watched Emma gain more respect, more admiration, more confidence. And now Emma had Alexander's attention. Vanessa didn't understand why. In her mind, she was the superior choice. She was attractive, ambitious, stylish. Everything a successful man should want. So why did Alexander keep looking at Emma? The question haunted her. And she hated not having an answer. That afternoon, while Emma was making copies near the records department, Vanessa approached her. The smile on Vanessa's face immediately made Emma suspicious. It wasn't genuine. It never was. Emma. Emma looked up. Vanessa. I heard you had a date. Emma paused. The fact that Vanessa knew already was concerning. News traveled fast in the office. Apparently, faster than she'd realized. It was dinner. Vanessa smirked. With the intern. Emma remained calm. His name is Alexander. Vanessa laughed. That's cute. Emma didn't respond. Vanessa stepped closer. You know what I find funny? What? The way you're acting like he's some great catch. Emma folded her arms. Is there a point to this conversation? Yes. Vanessa's smile widened. People don't stay poor forever, Emma. Emma frowned. What does that mean? It means when Alexander realizes he needs someone more successful, don't be surprised. The insult was obvious. Emma stared at her for several seconds. Then she smiled. A calm, confident smile. Thanks for your concern. Vanessa blinked. What? I'm sure if Alexander ever needs relationship advice, he'll know where not to go. A nearby employee nearly choked trying not to laugh. Vanessa's smile vanished instantly. Emma walked away before she could respond. For several moments, Vanessa stood frozen, humiliated. Again. And her anger only grew. That evening, Grandma Margaret found Emma working late. The office was mostly empty. Only a handful of employees remained. Grandma Margaret approached quietly. Still working. Emma smiled. Unfortunately, the older woman sat beside her. My dear, can I ask you something? Emma laughed. Another question? Just one. Okay. Grandma Margaret looked at her carefully. What do you think of my grandson? Emma's heart immediately skipped a beat. She hoped it didn't show. What do you mean? The older woman smiled knowingly. You know exactly what I mean. Emma looked away. For some reason, she suddenly felt nervous. Very nervous. He's nice. Just nice. Emma laughed. Okay, he's kind. Grandma Margaret waited. Intelligent. She continued waiting. Emma sighed. And funny. Anything else? Emma shook her head. No. Grandma Margaret smiled. You're a terrible liar. Emma burst into laughter. I wasn't lying. My dear, I've been reading people for 40 years. Emma covered her face. The older woman laughed. Then her expression softened. Alexander likes you. Emma's heart raced. She tried to hide it. Failed completely. Grandma Margaret noticed. Of course she noticed. And you like him too. Emma looked down at her hands. For a few seconds she said nothing. Then she admitted quietly. Maybe. Grandma Margaret smiled. It was all she needed to hear. Meanwhile, Alexander was sitting alone in his apartment overlooking Manhattan. A file sat open on his desk. But he wasn't reading it. His thoughts were somewhere else. Emma. The dinner. Her smile. The way she laughed. The way she listened. The way she treated people. He couldn't stop thinking about her. A notification suddenly appeared on his phone. It was a message from his executive assistant. Board meeting scheduled. Monday 9 a.m. Alexander stared at the screen. His expression changed. The board meeting meant one thing. Soon, his time as an intern would end. Soon, he would officially take control of Empire National Bank. And when that happened, everything would change, including his relationship with Emma. For the first time, the secret felt heavy. Very heavy. Because Emma still believed he was just an intern. She had no idea who he really was. No idea he owned the company she worked for. No idea he was one of the wealthiest men in America. Alexander leaned back in his chair. A feeling of unease settled in his chest. The longer he waited, the harder the truth would become. But telling her now could destroy everything. For the first time since the plan began, he questioned whether pretending had been a mistake. At the same moment, someone else was making plans. Dangerous plans. Vanessa sat in her apartment scrolling through company files she'd accessed through a friend in another department. A slow smile spread across her face. Because she had just discovered something. Something that could seriously damage Emma's reputation. She stared at the screen. Then whispered, "Oh, Emma." Her smile widened. "You have no idea what's coming." And for the first time since Emma defended Grandma Margaret, Vanessa felt hopeful. Not because she wanted success, but because she wanted revenge. And she was finally beginning to see a way to get it. Over the next several days, the atmosphere between Emma and Alexander continued to grow warmer. What had started as friendship was becoming something neither of them could deny. They had lunch together, worked together, stayed late together, and sometimes they found themselves talking long after work had ended. The more time Emma spent with Alexander, the more comfortable she felt around him. He made her feel safe, seen, valued. Things she hadn't felt in a very long time. One evening, after finishing another long day at the office, they sat together in a small coffee shop near the bank. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The city lights reflected across the wet streets outside. For a while, neither spoke. Then Emma smiled. "What?" Alexander asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. That smile says otherwise." Emma laughed. "I was just thinking. Dangerous. Very funny." Alexander smiled. "So what were you thinking?" Emma looked down at her coffee cup, then back at him. "You don't seem like an intern." Alexander nearly choked on his drink. Emma laughed. "I'm serious. What exactly does an intern look like?" "I don't know." She smiled. "But not like you." His heart skipped. For a second, he wondered if she somehow knew the truth. But Emma continued. "You're too confident." Alexander relaxed slightly. "Maybe I'm faking it." "No." Emma shook her head. "There's something different about you." The words lingered between them. For a moment, Alexander didn't know what to say. Because she was right. There was something different about him. A very big difference. A secret growing heavier every day. Later that night, after dropping Emma home, Alexander drove directly to his grandmother's penthouse. Grandma Margaret opened the door before he could knock. One look at his face told her everything. "You've fallen in love." Elle accent sight. "Grandma." "I'm right." He walked inside. "I think I've made a mistake." The smile disappeared from her face. A mistake. The secret. He sat down heavily. Emma still thinks I'm an intern. Grandma Margaret became quiet. For the first time, she didn't immediately respond, because she knew exactly what he meant. The longer the deception continued, the more painful the truth would become. I should tell her. Perhaps. But if I tell her now, you might lose her. Alexander nodded. And if I wait longer? Grandma Margaret sighed. You might lose her anyway. The room fell silent. Neither liked the answer. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Vanessa was putting her plan into motion. Over the previous week, she had quietly gathered information. Emails, internal reports, account access records. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to create suspicion. And suspicion was all she needed. The following morning, Emma arrived at work expecting a normal day. Instead, she found people whispering. Conversations stopped when she walked past. Employees avoided eye contact. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. As she approached her desk, one of her coworkers looked uncomfortable. Emma, what's going on? The woman hesitated, then handed her a printed document. Emma looked down. Her stomach dropped. The document contained allegations that confidential client information had been leaked from her department. And somehow, her name appeared on the report. What is this? I don't know. Emma's heart began pounding. This isn't possible. The coworker lowered her voice. People are saying the investigation started this morning. Emma stared at the paper. Her hands trembled. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing. Yet somehow her name was attached to a serious accusation. Before she could process what was happening, a department manager appeared. Emma. She looked up. Yes. I need you in conference room 3 immediately. The tone of his voice told her everything. This wasn't a routine meeting. People were already watching. Already judging. Already assuming. Across the office, Vanessa sat quietly at her desk. A satisfied smile tugged at her lips. The trap had been set, and Emma had walked directly into it. Unfortunately for Vanessa, she wasn't the only one paying attention. From across the room, Alexander had noticed everything. The whispers, the nervous looks, the fear in Emma's eyes. Immediately, something inside him tightened. He stood, without thinking, without hesitation, and followed Emma toward the conference room. Because whatever was happening, he wasn't about to let her face it alone. What neither of them realized was that this accusation was about to trigger a chain of events that would bring Alexander's biggest secret crashing into the open. And when that happened, nothing at Empire National Bank would ever be the same again. Emma sat in conference room 3 trying to keep her breathing steady. The printed report lay on the table in front of her. Across from her sat 2 compliance officers, a department manager, and a representative from Human Resources. The atmosphere felt cold, professional, uncomfortable, and terrifying. Emma had always been known as one of the most reliable employees in the department. Now she felt as though everyone was looking at her like a criminal. One of the compliance officers cleared his throat. Emma, we're conducting a review regarding unauthorized access to confidential client records. Emma nodded. I understand. We're not making any conclusions yet, but my name is already attached to the report. The officer exchanged a glance with the HR representative. Emma continued. I didn't access any unauthorized records. We'll determine that during the investigation. Emma wanted to scream. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm, because losing control would only make things worse. At that exact moment, Alexander was standing outside the conference room, listening. His jaw tightened. Every instinct told him something wasn't right. Emma wasn't capable of what they were accusing her of. He knew that. Grandma Margaret knew it too. The problem was proving it. A few hours later, Emma finally left the meeting. The investigation was officially underway. She hadn't been suspended. Not yet. But the damage had already begun. People stared, whispered, speculated. The rumors spread through Empire National Bank faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, employees throughout the building were discussing Emma Carter. And not in a good way. When Emma reached her desk, Alexander was waiting. The moment he saw her face, his heart sank. She looked exhausted, defeated. Emma. She tried to smile. Failed. I'm okay. No, you're not. The concern in his voice almost broke her. For a second, she wanted to cry. Instead, she sat down slowly. I don't understand what's happening. Alexander pulled up a chair beside her. Then let's figure it out. Emma laughed bitterly. You make everything sound simple. It's not simple. He leaned forward. But you're not facing it alone. For a moment, Emma simply stared at him. Then she nodded. Because despite everything happening around her, she believed him. Completely. Across the room, Vanessa watched the interaction with growing irritation. Why wasn't Emma falling apart? Why wasn't she alone? Why was Alexander still standing beside her? It wasn't supposed to happen this way. By late afternoon, the situation grew worse. Someone anonymously sent screenshots of the allegations to several employees. By evening, almost everyone in the building had seen them. The gossip became impossible to control. That night, Emma sat alone in her apartment staring at her phone. She had ignored calls from coworkers, ignored messages from friends, ignored everything. She felt numb. A notification appeared. Alexander. She hesitated before answering. Hello. Have you eaten? Emma blinked. What? Have you eaten? For the first time all day, she laughed. A small laugh, but still a laugh. That's your first question? Yes. Emma shook her head. No. Then I'm bringing food. Alexander, you don't have to. I'm already driving. Before she could argue, he hung up. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Alexander stood there holding takeout containers. Emma laughed despite herself. You really came. I told you I was coming. For the next hour, they sat together eating Chinese food on her couch, talking about everything except the investigation. Movies, travel, childhood memories, anything that could distract her. And somehow it worked. For the first time since morning, Emma felt human again. When Alexander finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. Thank you. He smiled. You've thanked me 3 times tonight. I'm serious. So am I. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. Then Emma quietly said, I don't know what I would have done today without you. The words hit Alexander harder than she realized. Because he knew something she didn't. A truth he was still hiding. And every day that passed made that secret heavier. The following morning, everything changed. At exactly 8:15 a.m., Alexander received a call. It was his executive assistant. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. Mr. Sterling, the board of directors has moved the announcement forward. Alexander froze. What? They want the transition immediately. His stomach dropped. How immediate? A pause. Then, tomorrow morning. Silence. Alexander closed his eyes. Tomorrow. Not next week. Not next month. Tomorrow. Tomorrow the entire bank would discover who he really was. Tomorrow Emma would discover who he really was. Tomorrow his secret would end. And he had still not told her himself. Meanwhile, Vanessa was feeling more confident than ever. The investigation had damaged Emma's reputation. Everything seemed to be working. Then she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end made her blood run cold. Miss Reed. Vanessa sat upright. Yes. This is internal compliance. Her confidence immediately vanished. We need to discuss your system access records. For the first time since her plan began, real fear entered Vanessa's heart. Because somewhere behind the scenes, someone had quietly started asking the right questions. And those questions were leading directly toward her. By the time the next morning arrived, 3 lives were heading toward a collision. Emma's, Alexander's, and Vanessa's. And when the truth finally exploded into the open, Empire National Bank would never be the same again. The next morning, Emma arrived at Empire National Bank feeling emotionally drained. She barely slept. The investigation was still ongoing. The whispers hadn't stopped. And despite trying to remain strong, the pressure was beginning to wear her down. As she entered the building, she immediately noticed something unusual. Employees were dressed more formally than normal. Managers were moving quickly between departments. Security personnel stood at positions where they normally weren't assigned. The entire atmosphere felt different, almost electric. Emma frowned. Something was happening. When she reached the accounting floor, conversations were already buzzing. Did you hear? I heard he's coming today. Finally. I can't believe we're actually going to see him. Emma looked around. See who? One coworker smiled excitedly. Alexander Sterling. Emma blinked. The CEO. The future CEO. Another employee leaned closer. They moved the announcement forward. Suddenly, everything made sense. The unusual energy. The extra security. The excitement. Today was the day the mysterious billionaire heir would officially take control of Empire National Bank. Emma had heard people talk about Alexander Sterling for months, but she'd never given it much thought. Right now, she had more important problems, like trying to save her career. Across the room, Vanessa looked nervous. Very nervous. She had barely slept either. Not because of the CEO announcement, because of the call she'd received from internal compliance. Something was wrong. She could feel it, and she hated that feeling. Meanwhile, Alexander sat alone in a private conference room several floors above. For the first time since beginning the undercover assignment, he wore a tailored navy blue suit. No intern badge. No disguise. No pretending. Today the truth would come out, and he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Would she feel betrayed? Would she feel humiliated? Would she hate him? The questions refused to leave his mind. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Grandma Margaret entered. She immediately noticed the tension on his face. "You look like you're heading to a funeral." Alexander laughed softly. "Feels a little like it." She sat beside him. "My dear boy, you're about to become CEO. I'm not worried about that." "I know." Grandma Margaret smiled gently. "You're worried about Emma." Alexander nodded. "I should have told her sooner. Perhaps. What if she never forgives me?" The older woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "If her feelings are real, she'll listen. And if they aren't," Grandma Margaret smiled, "then she was never the woman we thought she was." The words helped. A little, but not enough. At exactly 10 a.m., employees throughout Empire National Bank received an unexpected message. Mandatory staff meeting. Main conference hall. Attendance required. The announcement spread quickly. Within minutes, hundreds of employees filled the massive conference hall. Emma sat near the middle. Vanessa sat several rows away. Neither knew their lives were about to change. The room quieted as senior executives entered. Then board members. Then department heads. The atmosphere grew tense. Anticipation filled the air. Finally, the chairman of the board stepped onto the stage. "Good morning, everyone." The room became silent. "As many of you know, today marks an important moment in the history of Empire National Bank." He paused. "Today, we officially welcome the next leader of this institution." Employees straightened in their seats. Some looked excited. Others looked nervous. The chairman smiled. "It is my honor to introduce our new chief executive officer." He turned toward the side entrance. The doors opened, and Alexander walked into the room. For a moment, nobody reacted. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then confusion spread across the audience. Emma stared, blinking. Once. Twice. 3 times. Her brain refused to process what she was seeing. Alexander walked confidently toward the stage, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, surrounded by executives, board members, security personnel. The entire room watched in stunned silence. The chairman smiled. "Please welcome Mr. Alexander Sterling." The room exploded. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Absolute disbelief. Emma sat frozen. Her heart stopped. No. 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 This couldn't be happening. Her Alexander? The intern? The man she'd spent weeks with? The man she'd trusted? The man she'd fallen for? The billionaire heir? The future CEO? It wasn't possible. Except it was. Alexander stepped to the microphone, and their eyes met. Across a room filled with hundreds of people. His expression said everything. He knew. He knew exactly how shocked she was. He knew exactly what she was feeling. And he knew there was no way to explain it from a stage. Not now. Not here. Not like this. Meanwhile, Vanessa looked as though she'd seen a ghost. The color drained from her face. Her mouth literally fell open. Because the intern she'd mocked. The intern she'd dismissed. The intern she'd treated like nobody. Owned the entire bank. The room remained in stunned silence as Alexander began speaking. "Thank you for being here today." His voice echoed through the hall. Professional. Confident. Authoritative. Completely different from the man everyone thought they knew. "For the past several weeks, I have worked inside Empire National Bank under an assumed identity." The room erupted again. People looked at one another in disbelief. "It was important to me that I understand this institution from the ground level." Alexander continued. "I wanted to see how people treated one another when titles and power were removed." Many employees lowered their eyes, because they suddenly realized they had been watched the entire time. Then Alexander's gaze shifted, directly toward Emma. "For that reason, I learned something very valuable." Emma's heart pounded. And I learned who people truly are. The meaning wasn't lost on her, or on Grandma Margaret, who sat smiling quietly in the front row. The speech continued, but Emma barely heard any of it. Her mind was spinning. Every conversation, every lunch, every date, every moment had been built on a lie, hadn't it? When the meeting finally ended, employees exploded into conversation. Everyone wanted to meet the new CEO. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted attention. But Alexander wanted only one thing. Emma. Unfortunately, she was already gone. Because the moment the meeting ended, she'd walked out. And for the first time since this entire story began, Alexander was afraid. Truly afraid. Not of losing a company. Not of losing money. Not of losing power. But of losing the woman he loved. Alexander found Emma exactly where he feared he would. Outside the bank. Sitting alone on a bench across the street. The morning rush moved around her. Cars passed. People hurried by. But Emma barely noticed any of it. She simply stared ahead, trying to make sense of everything. For weeks, she had believed she knew Alexander. The intern. The man who worked beside her. The man who made her laugh. The man she trusted. Now she didn't know what was real anymore. Alexander approached slowly, carefully, as though one wrong step might cause her to disappear. Emma. She looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma laughed. A short, bitter laugh. I don't even know what to call you now. Alexander sat down beside her. You can still call me Alexander. Can I? The question hurt. More than she intended. Alexander lowered his eyes. You have every right to be angry. Emma looked away. I wasn't angry at first. Then what were you? Hurt. The honesty hit him like a punch. Hurt that every conversation we had was built on something you hid from me. Alexander nodded slowly. I know. No, I don't think you do. Emma stood. For weeks, she'd been carrying emotions she didn't understand. Now they came rushing out. You let me tell you things. Her voice trembled. You let me talk about money, work, relationships, fears. She looked directly at him. And the whole time you were one of the richest men in America. Alexander stood too. I wanted to tell you. When? The question landed hard. When exactly were you planning to tell me? Alexander had no answer. Because every answer sounded weak. Emma laughed again. Except this time tears appeared in her eyes. Do you know what hurts most? What? I would have liked you anyway. The words broke something inside him. Because she was right. She would have. Emma wiped her eyes. You didn't need to test me. Emma, you didn't need to pretend. He stepped closer. I know. Then why? For the first time, Alexander answered honestly. Completely honestly. Because I was afraid. Emma froze. He continued. Every woman I've ever dated wanted something from me. His voice was quiet. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes status. Sometimes connections. I got tired of wondering whether anyone actually cared about me. Emma listened. Despite herself. Then I met you. He smiled sadly. You defended my grandmother before you knew who she was. Emma immediately understood. The cleaner. Alexander nodded. The woman you stood up for. Silence. Then another realization hit her. Your grandmother. Grandma Margaret. Emma stared. The cleaner was your grandmother? Alexander nodded again. Slowly. Emma closed her eyes. Everything suddenly made sense. The questions. The interest. The timing. The project assignment. The strange conversations. All of it. When she opened her eyes again, Alexander was still standing there. Waiting. Not defending himself. Not making excuses. Just waiting. Finally she asked quietly. Was any of it real? The question terrified him. Because this was the only answer that mattered. Alexander stepped closer. Every moment. Emma looked at him. I never lied about how I felt. His voice cracked slightly. I never lied when I said I cared about you. He swallowed. And I definitely never lied when I fell in love with you. For several seconds, Emma couldn't speak. Because deep down she believed him. That was the problem. She believed him. And believing him made everything harder. Not easier. Meanwhile, inside Empire National Bank, another storm was brewing. Vanessa Reed had just been called into a private meeting with internal compliance. The moment she entered the room, she knew something was wrong. 3 people sat waiting. A compliance officer, a senior investigator, and a member of human resources. A file sat on the table. A thick file. The investigator folded his hands. Please sit down, Ms. Reed. Vanessa forced a smile. Of course. The smile disappeared when the investigator opened the file. We've completed our review. Her stomach dropped. Review. Not investigation. Review. That meant they already had answers. The investigator slid several documents across the table. System logs. Access records. Security reports. Vanessa stared at them. Her blood ran cold. Because every document pointed directly at her. The investigator spoke calmly. The false allegations against Emma Carter originated from your account credentials. Vanessa's face turned white. No. Yes. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. The room became very quiet. For the first time since this started, Vanessa realized she was in real trouble. Serious trouble. Across the city, Emma and Alexander were still talking. Hours had passed. Yet neither wanted to leave. Not with so much left unsaid. Eventually Emma sighed. I don't know what happens now. Alexander nodded. Neither do I. At least it was honest. Emma looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time not as an intern. Not as a coworker. But as Alexander Sterling. The billionaire. The CEO. The man who had somehow become important to her. And that realization scared her. Because despite everything, she still loved him. The truth hadn't changed that. It had only complicated it. As the sun began setting over New York City, Alexander quietly asked, Can I have a chance to make this right? Emma looked away, then back at him, and finally said the words he'd been waiting to hear. I'm not promising anything. Hope flickered in his eyes. But I'm willing to listen. For Alexander, it was enough. More than enough. Because sometimes the difference between losing everything and saving it is simply being given another chance. Neither of them realized it yet. But the biggest challenge wasn't behind them. It was still ahead. And it would arrive sooner than either expected.